The gift was surprisingly not as complex as I thought it was. This is JStar60, and I'm going to talk about this episode, which was so meaty, but it wasn't, rushed. Like, I saw Age of Ultron a day ago, and I'm going to do my review of that, tomorrow. And that felt really overstuffed. This, despite having everything storyline but Arya's, it did not feel cramped at all. And as always, we're going to go north to south, and we're going to do some book comparisons this week because there's. And when I say comparisons, I mean comparing how something played out in the show to the book. And I won't ruin stuff that's still going to happen, but there's some stuff where it's like if they were going to do it, they would have done it by now. And in this case, I feel like I'm at liberty to say how it played out in the books. So I'm going to have annotations, so if you don't want to. Sorry, I had an itch right there. So if you don't want to know how it played out in the books, you can skip around. But, I feel like there's some people who haven't seen the show who are curious, well, how is it in the books? And the seasons diverge quite a bit from the books, and I'm probably going to miss, some of the changes, but there's some major changes I'm going to talk about. Again, I'll talk about them when appropriate, but anyway, we're going to go north to south, because that's kind of how the show went. It kind of went north, then south, then east, then back south. Which I guess is the way to do it. So anyway, starting at the wall, Jon Snow goes north. Not much to his story. I kind of have an idea of where they're going with his story in the show. He does go a bit north in the book, but he doesn't go that. He's going much farther north than he does in the books, which leads me to believe they're going to change his story around. I feel like if you've read the books, the ultimate end result of Jon Snow's story, I feel like is going to be the same. I just feel like the where and how leading up to it is going to be different. Kind of like how Game of Thrones always is, where the end result of a character's story will more or less be the same. It's just a lot of the getting there will be different, as I'll talk about with Tyrion's story this week. Then we go into Sam's story, which is very different from the books. But first I'm just going to talk about how it is in the show, and then I'm going to explain how it is in the books. But in case you're wondering, most of the stuff in Sam's story this week was completely made up. There were a couple things that are kind of like stuff that happened in the books, but we are completely different. So there was the scene where they're bullying Gilly, which, I don't know, I thought was kind of cliche. And Sam finally got sex and had a Samgasm, although I prefer the book. It's a bit more interesting and creative. For a couple reasons. Okay, now, again, I'm going to talk compared to the books. So, again, if you don't want to know, if you're curious what Sam's story is like in the books, stick around. If not, I'm going to have an annotation saying skip here if you just want to hear me talk about the other stuff. So in the books, first off, early on in the story, Melisandre is going on about the King's Blood thing, which he goes about in this episode, and Jon Snow doesn't trust Melisandre at all, and there's a lot of times where he's not giving in to Melisandre because of ego, but just because he doesn't trust her. And he doesn't want her to get her hands on the baby, so what he does is he basically pulls a switcheroo. He swaps the king, he takes the king's baby and replaces it with Gilly's baby. And says, Sam, you're going to pretend this is Gilly's baby, and you're going to go with Gilly, and you're going to sail to Braavos with, I think, I don't think it was Amy, I forget, someone in the Night Watch comes with them. They're basically just going to sail and get the baby as far away from Melisandre as possible so she can't work her magic on it. And I always thought they were going that route in the show because they really emphasized Gilly's baby, and I thought, okay, and Sam following her to the end. I'm like, why are you going to do that if you aren't going to do it? But, we've long since passed the point. It was literally to a point where if they were going to send Sam to Braavos, they would have done it by now, and this episode pretty much confirmed, yeah, Sam's not going to Braavos. And in case you're wondering, yes, he does have a quick bump into Arya, but it's nothing. It's he just sees her and he doesn't realize it's her. Sam bumps into a lot of the Stark kids, but anyway, on the way to Braavos, Gilly's really upset, and she's crying because her baby's, gonna get sacrificed. And while they're on the boat, one day they get drunk, and Gilly, forces herself on Sam, and the sex scene, so they do have sex in the books, but it's very different in terms of the manner of how it happens. And I mean, it's understandable. For one thing, we kind of need a sweet, innocent sex scene after what we experienced last week. And also, Gilly is a very different character in the books, and the relationship she has with Sam is very different in the books. So, obviously, the sex scene is going to play out way differently. In fact, I'm very surprised it happened. There was a part of me that thought we weren't going to get it all, so I kind of guessed, ooh, we're getting it! And I kind of prefer the sex scene in the book for a guilty reason in that it was a bit more, erotic. She's literally, making Sam... It's kind of like when Ygritte forces herself on Jon Snow, except... But again, Gilly's, a completely different character in the books. I have to look. I forget if Aemon Targaryen dies of old age in the books. But yeah, so next storyline, we're going on to Winterfell, where... I love how they keep saying winter is coming. I think it's come! So yeah, everything's building towards... We're building towards this big battle at Winterfell. And there was some interesting stuff this week. I do like seeing Reek and Sansa talk. I mean, these are characters who are very similar. They're both characters who have been abused by Reek, except one is still rebelling, whereas the other is completely under Bolton's submission, completely knows what he's capable of, doesn't even want to try anything. And you kind of feel sorry for Reek, because he's not betraying Sansa because he's stupid or he's low. No, he's terrified of Bolton and what he will... Because we've seen what Bolton's done to him. He's like, I don't want to take any chances. I mean, if I light this candle... I mean, he could have lit... He's like, either I light the candle and lose my arm or something, or I completely come clean to Bolton, let him know on this, and get off scot-free. And, I mean, ultimately it's horrifying, but you get where Theon's coming from. He has been abused by Bolton to the point where he's not even going to try. Which is slightly different from the books. In the books, by this point, he's sort of he's surrounded by people who remember him when he was Theon, and he's somewhat regained his sense of self, but we'll have to wait and see how it develops. It's a little harder for us to understand what's going on. I mean, they're doing their best to sort of explain Theon's character without introspection, because in the books, this is all, this entire storyline is told from Theon's perspective, and it's very much us getting inside its head. It's kind of like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the movie where Chief Brumden's we can't get inside his head, although they're doing a much better job here keeping Theon Greyjoy front and center than Cuckoo's Nest, where they just sort of shove Brumden to the side. So moving on south, they're simplifying Stannis' story. In the book, he kind of spends a lot of time gathering for... There's this whole thing where he wants the Wildings to help the Night Watch to help him. And Jon says, no, I need all the men I can get to defend myself from the Night Watch, from the Wildings. And... sorry, I just remembered something I needed to put down later. But let's see, what was I going to say before? So, in the books, he basically has to go around and recruit all these forces, and it takes him so long that that by the time he starts marching on Winterfell, winter is coming. Also in the books, he doesn't have Melisandre with him. Her and Stannis' wife all stay at the wall, but I guess they're doing this to simplify it. They're really simplifying the story, but anyway. There was a really good conflict with Stannis where, for one thing, they did a really wonderful job explaining his need to win. We're losers either way. So do we go out trying to take Winterfell and succeed, or do we try to, or do we not even try at all, just go back to the wall and lose? He wants to go out losing, trying rather than failing. And there's also this good dilemma of how he has an opportunity to win, but it involves sacrificing his daughter. And I love how this was set up. They had a very simple, not seeming to do anything scene where he's talking about how he's going to how much he cares and values his daughter, which comes into play later when he is given the option to sacrifice. He's like, nope, not doing it. And again, it didn't feel rushed because we could think back to that scene and be like, oh, I get that. But yeah, that was really nice stuff. Although in the books, again, I forget if it was Stannis' daughter who was going to be sacrificed in the books. I feel like it was someone different. And, oh yeah, completely forgot. We checked in with Brienne. Brienne's not doing anything this season. It's like, I honestly just feel like they had her Sansa search in Season 4 simply so that they could get her storyline out of the way and they didn't have to worry about it in Season 5. Because, yeah, in the books, again, a reminder, in the books, Sansa's chilling out in the Vale, and Brienne's running around looking for her. Let's see, so Jaime's story, not much happened, was just sort of a here's where Jaime's at, and there was also a check-in, not only... And there was also a bin Bronn. There was a lot of boobs and sex in this episode, I think about. More so than previous episodes. Like, you had Sam having his Samgasm, you had Daenerys fucking Daria, you had... Yeah, and the boobs in the cell, yeah. It really didn't seem to add much. It very much seems like they're going to go for the cliche of, hey, let's join forces and break out. Again, I haven't read... This is very different from the books, because in the books, I mean, Jaime's sent away from King's Landing, but in the books, he just goes up north to, like, take out the remaining pockets of Northern resistance. And Dorne's in the books, but I forget, that was, like, one of the more forgettable storylines of the books, and so I don't remember what happens, although it is in the books, but it's, like, very different. I'm pretty sure the Lannister girl they're rescuing, she's a completely different character in the book. I honestly don't find her that interesting in the show, just because she's pretty much just seems like Sansa from Season 1, and how, I love him, I don't want to leave, I'm going to marry him, he's wonderful, except there's a genuine, at least there seems to be a genuine relationship there, whereas Joffrey, we know he's a straight-up dick. Alright, next up in Westeros, Ser Jorah and Tyrion's story. They got to Daenerys a lot faster than the books. In the show, in the books, they're at the gates of Mir and they haven't met Daenerys yet. The way they get there in the books is much more convoluted. Again, I'll talk a bit more about how their stories are different in the books. But, yeah. I do like this sort of streamlining. I am kind of curious to see where they go. I mean, especially knowing where the Mirren story goes in the books. And I'll talk a bit more about when we get there, because there's some things that happen that I don't want to ruin for you. But I'm interested to see how they handle it. And if you've read the books to know what's coming, you're like me, like, where are they going with this? Like, because of all... How are they going to work with all this stuff happening? But we'll have to wait and see. And it is interesting to see Tyrion and Daenerys together, and especially given the fact that, again, this is like the first time a major character from across the sea is like linking up to Daenerys' story, which is what I really liked about Dance with Dragons in the books, is that these characters that were Daenerys' story, which was really disconnected from the rest of the world, it's finally starting to link up. It's finally starting to matter. Be interesting, although I was sort of annoyed a bit how cliche it was, because like Ser Jorah basically gets there through Gladiator, of how kicked out, get into arena and fight your way up. It was a good fight, and I mean the whole bit where Tyrion convinces him to get auctioned is good. And if you're wondering, the slave auction does happen. They do get captured by slaves in the books, although in the books it's different. In the book, Tyrion gets bought, and then he convinces the buyer that they need Ser Jorah. And also in the book, there's a bit more things that happen on the way to Meereen. But again, they're streamlining that for time. Still wondering what Littlefinger's playing out with the old woman, who love the whole bit she has with him, and more of Tommen getting pushed around in King's Landing. And I guess, I mean, I'm pretty sure I talked about everything, so let's talk about Cersei's downfall, which was really well done. I mean, the whole bit. I mean, we go in there. First off, we see Marjorie in complete, utter shit. Like, she looks terrible. Like, I mean, one of the most attractive people on Game of Thrones. Yes, I just said that. And yeah, she is complete shit. And then I love the way that the High Septon gets Cersei. And I read the book, so I knew this was coming. So he basically is describing, like, everything Marjorie's going to, all this, the trial and stuff. And Cersei's thinking, oh, this is what Marjorie's going through. But if you read the books, you know, this is going to flip around on her. And it does. I love that. He gives this really long, really detailed description, and then it completely flips, and now Cersei's doing it. And in case you're curious, the books, again, quick summary. Season 5, they're taking 2 books, Feast for Crows and Dance of Dragons. Feast for Crows and Dance of Dragons were originally supposed to be 1 book, but so much happened to it that George R. R. Martin decided to split it in half, tell 1 chunk of the stories in 1 book, and 1 chunk of the stories in the other book, both of which are happening simultaneously. Although Dance of Dragons contains, like, the last third of, like, the stories talked about, quarter of the stories talked about, and Dance in Feast for Crows, and this is where Cersei's story in Feast for Crows ends. So, yeah. So it's kind of interesting how, yeah, it ends for getting locked up. Basically in the same boat as Marjorie, except now the stuff is flipped. And if you're wondering who turned on Cersei, I have an idea. I forget who calls her on the books, but I have it, or if someone calls her on the books. I think in the books, Marjorie's not in jail and she calls her out. No, I don't think that's it. No, that's not it. Actually, I have a pretty good idea of who called her out, but again, I don't want to ruin it. Again, it's one of those, I've read the books, so I have an idea of who called her out, but I don't want to ruin it for those of you who haven't read the books. So, yeah, no Arya this week. And the show's obviously building towards the Siege of Winterfell. I feel like part of me felt like it was going to happen, feels like it's going to happen next week. I'm just looking at the episode titles. Hard Home's next. That's the place in the north where Jon Snow's going. And there's something that happens in Daenerys' story, and I thought it was going to happen next episode. It's either happening next episode or not. Nines, where the Dance of Dragons. I feel like the thing that happens in Daenerys' story, I won't say what, is going to happen in that episode. I won't say what, though. Although, there is something I feel at liberty to talk about now. Like, there's something big that happens in the books that I wanted to talk about, but I feel like we've kind of I was afraid it would happen, but I feel like we've reached the point where if they were going to do it, they've already passed the point. They would have done it a while ago, and the story's changed so much from the books that I honestly doubt they're going to do it. So, again, if you haven't read the books, please stop at this point because... No. Let me rephrase that. If you haven't read the books and you don't want any slim spoilers, stop here right now, but if you're curious, continue again. This could still happen, but I highly doubt again. We've passed the point where it was supposed to happen, and the story's changed so much that none of the circumstances surrounding this one thing have happened. So, again, this is probably going to be nothing unless you don't want the books ruined. So, I'm going to give you like a couple seconds to stop if you don't want this potential book spoiler. So, here we go. In the books, Mance Rayder is still alive. You know, the Wilding chief who got burned, who Caesar from him. And I honestly thought they were going to do it because, and they could still, but the reason why is you had this major actor playing the head of the wildlings, and he barely did anything. And I thought, you're not gonna burn him, are you? You're gonna keep him around, right? Cause to do his thing. And I thought they were gonna do it, but a lot of the circumstances behind it weren't. Like, for example, in the books, like, Jon Snow learns about the wedding in Winterfell, and he's like, I need to go down there, but I can't because I'm too busy. And Melisandre's like, well, my fires, I see a girl heading towards her. I send someone down there to retrieve her, and because in the books, like, Sansa's not at Winterfell in the books. The King's Landing was supposed to send Arya, but Jaime was in charge, and he sent a girl who looked like her but wasn't. So Jon Snow sends Mance Rayder down. If you're wondering how he survived the burning in the book, they swapped him out with a fake. Like, Melisandre used magic to make some random guy look like Mance Rayder, and she kept the real guy. She used magic to transform Mance Rayder into some random schmuck, so he was able to get out of there. So yeah, so there's been this whole thing of is he gonna come back? Will he come back? And I think we've reached that point where it's not happening. It would have been cool, but I doubt it. So yeah, that's all I have to say about it. I mean, again, hope maybe Mance Rayder will come back, but I doubt it at this point. But if you disagree, comment below, like, dislike, subscribe. This is JStar60, and I'll see you guys in the next episode where hopefully that thing will happen, but probably not. But more than likely, the Siege of Winterfell will happen. Which, that's not a spoiler. We're building towards it. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Take care.